Good morning. Welcome everybody to Fix It Finance. We have a good one today. We are discussing FHSAs. I'm just gonna get Instagram up and going, and then we will get started. Awesome. Okay. Welcome. My name is Fikayo, and this is Fix It Finance, where I help you take control of your money and build the life that you want. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. I go live every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. I was going to say 12 a.m. I was like, if I'm up at 12 a.m., it's likely baby related. Oh, okay. So we have this live question and answer, discussion and question and answer session every Saturday. So if you've been following us the last couple of weeks, we discussed TFSAs this past month. Actually, the entire month of May has been, we talked about RSPs, we talked about TFSAs, we talked about our ESPs. That was a really good one, especially if you have children. Check that out. Okay, our ESPs was really good. I was actually touched because someone actually walked up to me. I was like, she watched that video, she went to go and check in on a group RESP that she had, and turns out for the last couple of years that RESP has made no money. Okay, so yes, go and check it out. Okay. Next month we have some exciting topics lined up. We'll be doing a deep dive into investing, so things like ETFs, index funds, mutual funds, GICs, the whole nine. So I'm hoping to take a deep dive so you can know the pros and cons of each. You can understand what each one does, and then you can use that to make your decision. Okay, when you're deciding what to actually invest in. Okay, so remember to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know when new videos are released. I'm gonna be recording videos as well to try and complement the live videos. But for now, this is where we're at. Join us every Saturday, and we would love to have you. Okay. Excuse me. Today we are discussing FHSAs, the First Home Savings Account. So that's a new account. It was just introduced last year. It was funny because I was here in Canada when they introduced the TFSA2 for the first time. So in my mind, I'm starting to feel like, wow, we've been here a while. Okay. So what is it? The FHSA is the First Home Savings Account. Okay. So today's topic is First Home Savings Account, FHSA, a beginner's guide. So what is the account? It's called a First Home Savings Account. And what is the purpose? So when we talked about TFSAs, we talked about RESPs, we talked about RSPs. We mentioned how, they are accounts that are put forth by the government to encourage everybody to save, be it saving for your child's education, saving for your retirement, saving for a rainy day, saving for whatever, But this particular account is to encourage you to save for your first home and to provide a way that people can grow their money, tax advantage, so that they can use that to buy a house. Okay, because of course the government is trying to address some of the housing issues and housing shortages. If you watch the live that we did on budget 2024, you remember one of the things I mentioned was, I think it was regarding the home buyers plan that they're planning on increasing and whatnot. As much as possible, the government is doing their best, but they keep working on, I think, the wrong side of the equation. They keep working on the demand side of the equation. So when it comes to economics, demand and supply, they are working on the demand side a lot, and the demand side does not need help. It's the supply side that needs help. Okay. So, take some time, watch that video about budget 2024. There was some really good discussion there. Make sure you look into the TFSA video as well and the RRSP video, because the FHSA, the First Home Savings Account, actually takes the pros of those two accounts and combines it into one really nice account. Okay. As much as, I'm saying the government is working on the quote unquote wrong side of the equation, this particular account is actually really nice. Okay. And you definitely want to understand it if you've never bought a home before. So right out the gate, if you already have a home, chances are you don't qualify for this account. So if you opened one because your bank sent you an email, or Questrade World Simple told you to open a First Home Savings account, make sure you can take your money, move it out, because you might get yourself into some trouble. Okay. However, if you've not bought a home before and you actually want to buy a home, this is a very good account to look into. Okay. So I mentioned it's an investment, not just a savings account, for buying your first home. Okay. So let's talk about eligibility. So as usual with all things, when it comes to accounts like this, the first thing you want to know is who is eligible to open it and what are the requirements. So number one, you have to be 18 years or older to open this account. Okay, you must be a Canadian resident for tax purposes. Last week we talked about what it means to be a Canadian resident for tax purposes, so make sure you check out that video if you haven't. We really give you some good stuff here at Fix It Finance. I hope people are learning and paying attention, because the whole point of giving you all these resources is so that you can take, full control of your own financial house. Okay, like you want to make sure you know all these things so you can take control of your own financial house, so you can make your own financial decisions, so nobody can bamboozle you, because a lot of things in the financial side of the world, at least from my experience, and a lot of my background is finance, it's accounting, it's whatnot. A lot of these things have terms and acronyms and whatnot that make it seem bigger than they actually are. Okay, so you always want to make sure, and that's the whole point of Fix It Finance. We teach you some of these things, so when you're making your decisions, you're making well-informed decisions, financial decisions especially. You understand? For example, when we talked about RESPs, a lot of people didn't understand, some of the shortcomings of a group RESP account, for example. But the person that's going to sell it to you, they're going to come and tell you it's the best thing since sliced bread and blah 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 blah. Meanwhile, they're just after their commission. Okay, so those are the kind of things we try and teach you here. So I really hope you're learning. I hope you're sharing it and letting people understand what's going on. Okay, so back to the FHSA account. So it's the first home savings account. If you are 18 years or older and you are a Canadian resident for tax purposes, not just resident as per physically here, like I mentioned, we talked about that last week, what it means to be a Canadian resident for tax purposes. So check out that video. You must be a Canadian resident for tax purposes and 18 years of age or older. So for a first-time home buyer, again, it's called first-time home buyer account. So you must be a first-time home buyer. What does that mean? Then it means basically someone who has not owned a home in the last year, right? In the year the account is open. So if you open an FHSA this year and you own a home, you don't qualify. Okay, so like I mentioned, if you already opened one, go and close it. Okay, so if you don't own a home and it's going to be your first home, and you haven't owned a home in the last 4 years, okay, so that's what they're looking at. So you didn't own a home this year and the last 4 years before, so basically roughly 4 to 5 years. If you've not owned a home, chances are you qualify to open this account. So let's talk about contribution room. That's always the big one. So the annual limit for the FHSA is $8,000 per year. That's the maximum you can put into the account per year. Okay, so the maximum this year for the TFSA is 6,000. The maximum for the RRSP is 18% of your take-home pay. So 18% of your pre-tax income, to a maximum amount. Okay, so this 8,000 is pretty healthy. Okay, the annual limit is $8,000 per year. The lifetime limit is $40,000 per year. So later on, we're going to discuss, some of the pros and cons of this account, some of the benefits and limitations, actually, to be specific as to, okay, what does this mean for me if I own this account? Okay. So 8,000 per year is the limit, 40,000 for the lifetime. So that's the max you can absolutely put in. So when we talked about RESPs, the lifetime maximum for RESPs was 50,000. So that means whether you start now or you start next year or you start 50 years from now, the maximum you can put throughout that period, through a lifetime period, is 40,000 for the FHSA. Okay. You can carry forward unused contribution room. So let's say you open an account this year, you can only afford to put $1,000 inside. What that means is next year you can put in 8,000 for next year plus the 7,000 you did not put in this year, which is really nice because sometimes this contribution rooms disappear per year, and in this particular case you can carry forward the contribution room, but again the maximum annual still applies. So the maximum duration, you can open an FHSA similar to some of the other accounts we've discussed. The maximum you can have it open for is 15 years. Okay, so if you open one today, you have 15 years from now to do what you need to do, which is to buy the first home. Okay, or until the end of the year you turn 71, whichever comes first. So if you're in your 60s, you want to make sure you consider that. But if you're younger than that, you have 15 years, you're not going to reach 71 before you have to empty out this account. Okay, you must close the account after your first withdrawal. Okay, so the moment you make a withdrawal, whether it's small or large, you must close the account. So you want to be cognizant of that when you are making your decisions. Okay. For tax benefits, let's move on to tax benefits. Okay, so contribution, like I mentioned, annual maximum is 8,000, lifetime maximum is 40,000, and you must close the account once you make your first withdrawal. Okay, so moving on to tax benefits. So some of the biggest tax benefits, like I mentioned when we talked about RRSPs and we talked about TFSAs, this particular account combines, the good parts of those two accounts, which is really nice. Okay, so the contributions you put into your FHSA are tax deductible, just like an RRSP. So meaning if you put in 8,000 this year, what's going to happen is your taxable income is going to be reduced by $8,000, which is a lot. If you're able to put in the full 40,000, your taxable income is going to be reduced by 40,000. Say you make 100,000 a year, you save ridiculously aggressively. You don't eat, you don't do anything, and you save 40,000 for that year. You can potentially have pay tax on only 60,000, okay, instead of the full 100,000. So that it starts to add up, okay. Um, just like a TFSA though, when you make a withdrawal from this account, it's not taxed either. Okay, so that's why I said it combines the good things of the RSP and the FHSA. So the money you put in, you can use to reduce your taxable income for the year. And then when you take the money out, there's no tax on it. Okay, so that's really, really good because it allows this money to grow tax advantage, to a large extent, not even tax deferred like an RS, because tax deferred basically means you pay the tax tomorrow. But in this particular case, you don't pay tax upfront and you also don't pay tax when you withdraw. So that's a major advantage, especially for those of you that are really investment savvy, that you know what you're doing when it comes to investing. You could potentially grow this 8,000 per year, 40,000 lifetime maximum into, a lot of money, you understand, and not have to pay any tax on it and then use it to buy your home. So that's a really good thing. So when it comes to tax benefits, the other thing about this account is you can combine it with the home buyers plan. So when we talked about RRSPs, again, go back and watch that video. We discussed how you can potentially withdraw from your RRSP to buy a house using the home buyers plan. Okay, so you can combine the home buyers plan with the FHSA to buy a home. So the home buyers plan as of today, the maximum you can take out is $35,000. Okay, Budget 2024 is introducing it such that you can potentially take up to 60,000. Now that hasn't passed yet, but if it does, you could be able to take potentially up to $60,000 out of your RRSP to buy a house. Combined with the first home savings account of 40,000, that starts to really add up, and it is per person in a marriage or in a common law relationship. So, for example, let's say we hadn't bought a house. I have 40,000 in my FHSA, and I can take up to 35,000 from my home buyers plan. That's $75,000. My husband can also take the same. Combine that, that's $150,000 down payment that we could potentially have for a house. So that really starts to add up. Okay. So if budget 2024 passes, that 35,000 is going to go up to 60,000. So potentially you could withdraw up to $100,000 to be able to buy a home, and that is really, really good, and it starts to add up. Okay. So let's talk about some of the investment options. Because we mentioned it's a really good account. It's tax advantaged on both ends, both on the withdrawal end as well as on the deposit end. Okay. Excuse me. From investment options, I always mention with TFSA, RSP, RESP, SSSP, I'm joking. In all the accounts, it is not an investment in and of itself. It's a container, right, that can hold investments. So you can't, quote unquote, invest into an FHSA, in the sense of you can't put money into an FHSA and say, oh, I've invested in an FHSA. No, the FHSA is a container. So what you can do is you take that money, use it to buy stuff and put it in the container that is the FHSA. So you buy an indexed ETF, you buy a mutual fund, you buy a stock, you buy a bond, you buy GIC, you buy, heck, you want to leave your money in cash, so that's how the account works. It's a container. It's not an investment in and of itself. Okay. So make sure you know that, especially when you're discussing with banks and some of these other investment houses, because that's how they get people to literally move money. You transfer $20,000 into an FHSA and the money is just sitting there doing nothing. Okay. So you want to be cognizant of that. The whole point is to take this money and grow this money so you can buy a house. Okay. So here are some of the investments it can hold. Similar to, when we talked about TFSAs, RRSPs, RESPs, and co. It can hold cash. It can hold GIC, so your guaranteed investment certificates. It can hold mutual funds, ETFs, bonds, stocks, and any of the above that invest in alternate assets such as crypto, real estate. So we talk about that a lot. You can't invest in crypto in an FHSA, for example. However, if you find an ETF, that invests in it, yes, you can invest. So if you have a Bitcoin ETF or Ethereum ETF, which I don't know if has that passed yet, I don't know. I think it has. No, or it's going to. Anyways, so you can invest in those type of alternate assets. Same thing, you can't use your FHSA to invest in a house. I mean, yes. It's the first home savings account, to buy a house. So you can't necessarily use it to invest in a house. However, you can invest in a REIT, for example, or other assets that invest in homes, for example. Okay. You always want to be careful, like I mentioned, outside an RRSP, you want to be careful when you're investing in US stocks or ETFs in any of these accounts, and in an FHSA, and that's because you may be subject to non-resident withholding taxes on dividends that you receive. Okay. Now, again, if you're going to do, say, mutual index mutual fund and an index ETF, the dividends that you receive are not significant enough to a large extent. Again, don't quote me. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm just your financial, second opinion guru. um, you want to make sure that you don't have you want to make sure that you are careful when you're doing US related type situations, especially if there's a lot of dividends involved. Okay, so make sure you do your analysis and you figure out how that's going to happen in terms of how much tax you're going to have to potentially pay, because that could start eating into your returns. Okay. um you can open an account with a brokerage or with any of the banks, so Questrade, Wealth Simple, TD, BMO, which other one is there, Scotia, any of those banks, any credit union, Service and Co, ATB. Open an account with any one of them. Okay. If you notice, there's been a lot of push in terms of advertising from a lot of these investment houses on the FHSA, and that's because it's new. So expect that for some time. Okay. um let's talk about some of the benefits of this particular account. So contributions, like I mentioned, are tax deductible like the RRSP, and the growth is tax free like the TFSA. So those are two major benefits of this particular account. Okay. I mentioned it can be combined with the home buyers plan, providing up to $75,000 in plus growth. That's how much you put in. That's not counting how much the money grows. All right. Or more potentially, if budget 2024 passes and the home buyers plan is increased to 60,000. Okay. Um, Another thing I really, really like about this account is, let's say, for example, you save money in it or you grow the money and then you decide, I'm not buying a house, or I'm not going to do it's 15 years time, you still haven't bought a house because you just never decided to buy a house for whatever reason. You can then transfer the balance into your RRSP. Or let's say, for example, let's say you're buying a $500,000 house, you saved 40,000 plus into the FHSA, your down payment is only 25,000, right? At 5%. So you don't end up using all the money in the FHSA. You can transfer whatever is left into your RRSP. Okay. Note, like I mentioned, you have to close the account once you make your first withdrawal. So it's not like you can keep it open and keep investing in it. No. The moment you touch it, you are required to close it. Okay. So you can transfer whatever is left into your RRSP, which is a tax deferred account. So it's also, you still get some tax benefits that way. Okay. Another benefit of this account that I really like is the fact that there's no repayment required. So the home buyers plan, once you take that money out of your RRSP, you are required to pay it back, right? If you don't pay it back on time, what happens is they start adding a portion of it back into your income. So let's say you borrow $15,000, and once the time limit has passed, you have not paid it back. What they're going to do is they're going to start adding $1,000 to your tax return each year as a way of paying back that money. Okay. So you want to make sure you pay back if you touch the home buyers plan. But with the FHSA, there's no repayment required, which is really nice. So once you take the money out, that's it. Done, dusted, over, we've moved on. Okay. So that's really nice. Let's talk about some of the limitations of this particular account. So the account is still under construction. Like I mentioned, it's new. Last year was when it was introduced. So I mentioned I was here when they introduced the TFSA back in 2009, I believe. So the account evolved and changed over time. So in this particular situation, same thing. The account is still under construction. I expect there will be some changes in the coming years. Okay, so that's one of the things I'm not necessarily. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not something to be uncomfortable. You can still invest in it. However, you want to make sure that you put this under advisement. So if you have an FHSA, make sure you pay attention to some of the policies and the rules and the laws and the tax changes that happen as each budget is introduced. Okay. There's a $40,000 lifetime maximum, so 8,000 per year, like I mentioned. In some markets, that is really small. Okay. So in most places, you need to put 5% as a down payment on a house of 500,000 or more. If your house is, between 500 and a million, you have to put 5% on the first 5,000, 10% on, between 500 and 1 million. Anything over 1 million, you have to put 20% down. $40,000 does not even move the needle in some particular markets. Let's say you're in Calgary, you want to buy a standalone, pretty standard home for a growing family. You're looking at least $800,000. Okay, it starts to add up. If you're in Toronto, if you're in BC, $40,000 does not even begin to cut it. Okay, so I think to a large extent the lifetime maximum might be a little small. Okay, so they may have to adjust that in the near future just to accommodate some of these larger markets and markets that are growing, like Calgary and Edmonton. There's the first time home buyer restriction. So I think it's very ridiculous that those people that already have homes cannot take advantage of it. However, I get it. I understand we need to encourage more people to buy homes. So I'm all for it. So it's not useful for anybody that already has a home or has had a home in the last 5 years. Okay, so if you want to take advantage of this account, you have to sell your house, wait, and then buy it, which I think may not necessarily be the best strategy, but more engine oil to your armpit. Okay. More grease to your elbow. That's just a I had a friend in sorry, this is completely funny. A friend in secondary school. She used to do a lot of dry jokes, and that's how that came about. Wow, that took me back. So there's that saying of more grease to your elbow. So she would say more engine oil to your armpit. Or like if she's talking about pinafore, she would say like a pinafore, that the uniform we used to wear. She would say no, needle of five. I'm like, what? It was hilarious, but wow, that took me back. Okay. Um moving on to the next limitation. So savings in your okay, sorry. I lost my train of thought. Okay, I'm back now. So saving in an FHSA, so the savings in the name, you know how we talked about in TFSA, where it's a tax-free savings account. A lot of people confuse it and use it as just a savings account. So they just park money there. They don't actually invest the money. Okay, same thing in this particular case. I think a lot of people, the savings that is in the name, people might just decide to just park money there. And I see that all the time where people just use their TFSA as another savings account. Okay, it is an investment account, meaning you can take whatever funds you put in and actually invest in it, like we talked about earlier when we were talking about investment options. Okay, um you can you can decide to use it both as a savings or as an investing account. So if you're buying Horizon is within the next year to 18 months, obviously you don't want to do anything too risky, so you want to put it into something more conservative like a GIC or a high interest savings account and whatnot. If you're buying Horizon is longer, so over 18 months, in that 3 to 5 year mark, you definitely want to make sure that you are investing, not just saving the money in that account. Okay. Another limitation for it is complexity. So you have to make sure you're managing contributions and withdrawals and contribution room, especially when you have a RRSP, you have a TFSA, you have an RESP. So you want to make sure you plan carefully so you don't get yourself into trouble with this particular account by mixing it up with some of your other accounts and making those sort of, for example, you have funds you want to invest in, you go and put it to your FHSA instead of your RRSP by mistake, things like that. So you want to make sure you're very careful. And then of course there are steep penalties, just like the TFSA. There's a 1% penalty for over contribution per month. So that's 12% per year. It adds up. Okay. And as the money grows, that penalty also grows. So you want to make sure you don't over contribute. So that's what I'm saying. Let's say you have all 4 accounts or more with, say, Questrade or Wealthsimple, whatnot. Be very careful as you're transferring funds in and out to make sure you don't go putting funds where they should not be. Okay. Final section. I'm just gonna talk about some tips real quick when it comes to this account. As always, start early. Open an FHSA if you qualify, you are eligible. So we mentioned eligibility earlier when we started this session. You have to be a Canadian resident for tax purposes. So we talked about what it means to be a Canadian resident for tax purposes last week. So check out that video. you want to make sure you have to be a Canadian resident for tax purposes and 18 years or older. So you want to make sure if you are and you have not bought a house yet, make sure you open an FHSA and start early as soon as you're eligible, okay, to maximize your contribution room and the growth potential. Contribute regularly as much as possible. Make regular contributions to take full advantage of the limits, okay? So you want to make sure, because this account is tax advantage so much. Let's say you have money to save, you're fresh out of college or you're fresh out of whatever, you just finished paying off all your consumer debt and you're ready to start saving for a house. If you have the option between an RRSP and an FHSA, you probably want to start with the FHSA just because of the tax advantages, in the sense of you're gonna get the tax benefit, because it's going to reduce your taxable income, and whatever money you take out of it is tax advantage in that there's no tax on it when you withdraw. Okay, and then you can now start contributing to your RRSP, to make sure that you grow that money, so you can then be able to withdraw it using the home buyers plan and all that, like we talked about earlier. So you want to contribute early and contribute regularly. Okay. Another tip is to diversify your investments. Okay, use a mix of options within the FHSA, not just to balance risk and not just to, because a lot of times people are risk averse in these things. The biggest thing is you want to maximize your returns, okay, and you want to make sure you do it strategically. Okay, so like I mentioned, you can potentially use it as cash, in the sense of having it just in a high interest savings account and whatnot. And you can also invest it, especially if your time horizon is much farther. Okay, so you want to make sure you diversify. There's so many options you can have inside. You can have GICs, mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds, blah blah blah. Make sure you put it all together in such a way that it helps you achieve your return goals, and not just, you just always want to stay on the safe side and minimize risk. Okay. Monitor your limits. I mentioned that already, but I'll mention it again. So keep track of your contribution rooms, your carry forward contribution rooms, how you're funding the account. That has happened to people before. You meant to put money in your RRSP, but you put it in your TFSA instead, or vice versa. So you want to make sure you monitor that and keep it nice and clean. Last but not least, you want to plan your withdrawals. Okay, so make sure that the withdrawal is close to the time when you are closing the house, because once you withdraw from it, that's it, the account has to close. Okay, even if you have 20 open, all of them are closing. Okay, so if you're buying a house, let's say you sign a purchase agreement today, the house is not going to be ready until 2025 or 2026. Don't withdraw today, withdraw closer to when the house is going to close, so you can maximize your returns, and whatever savings you're going to be doing. Okay. I'm gonna check. Oh, I see here we have a question from Michael. When am I starting my personal finance management services? I've already started. I started 5 years ago. To a large extent, I've been doing most for free, just because I'm trying to give back to the community as much as possible. It will become a paid service soon, but for now, we do it for the kingdom. On Instagram, I see here Anu is saying that's a lot for a solid down payment. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Satoizin is saying more power to your elbow. Yes, more power to your elbow. Sorry, that my friend, that took me way, way back. Holy. Anyways, thank you all for joining today. It is 10:28, so we're going to wrap up here. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the videos, like I mentioned, from the prior weeks where we talked about TFSA's RSV. I had a friend call me this week and she was asking me questions about I think her work and just what she should invest in and whatnot. And every single thing she was asking me, I mentioned in those videos. In my mind, I was like, go and watch the video. I sent it. I said, watch the video, then call me back if you still have questions. Okay, so that's the whole point of doing all these. So thank you all for joining. Again, that's why we're here. If you have questions, as much as possible, send us a DM. Look at me asking for DM. Send us a DM, send us an email, fikaya@fixifinance.ca, and then we will take it up from there. Thank you all for joining today. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.